So my next tweet here is going back, now that we're in February 2019, we can talk more about named tweets. Named tweets. So I have some tweets that are titled, and this one is kind of heavy, but we'll go right into it. And it's actually 3 tweets here, but they're all different versions of the same thing. Top 10. Topped 10. That's 10 that's been topped. And of course, based 10, which is the final version of it. So what I'll do is I will read based 10, this named tweet here. I'll go through the list and we will discuss each point, each sentence of it. So based 10. Number 1, memory is an illusion. Number 2, opinions can be assigned. Number 3, perfection is a fallacy. Number 4, truth is indeterminable. The other tweets had it saying, truth cannot be known, and the truth is unknowable. But the final version is, number 4, truth is indeterminable. Number 5, energy survives all outcomes. Number 6, time perception is relative. Number 7, love is the answer. Number 8, balance is the goal. Balance is the goal. Number 9, contradictions trick the mind. Number 10, complete? Okay, so like I said, heavy, brainy, heady, whatever you'd like to call it. But we'll go through and we'll talk about what I'm saying here. And if you have any thoughts on this, please leave a comment below, because it's got some interesting things. So number 1 says that memory is an illusion. And you might be saying to yourself, what do you mean memory is an illusion? I remember what happened. They remember what happened. We have a record of what happened. What do you mean memory is an illusion? Well, think about it. What do you really remember? What are memories in your head? A lot of times memories are stored as images. You have an image of what happened in your head. But really, depending on your emotions, your state of mind, you might not have even recorded what happened to you accurately. It could be that you had been emotionally clouded. In fact, you were, obviously filtering everything through your sensory inputs, your emotions, your heart, and your mind while you're taking in information. So memory is an illusion. It doesn't really exist. It only exists because we can recall. But at the end of the day, memory is, we only think we have memory because we are looking at how we experienced it, how we experienced that moment. Do we record all the information? Do we record the information from that moment accurately? Or did we take it in our own way? We have a memory of what happened, but if you're in a traumatic situation, you might not even remember correctly. People have actually had reports of being robbed at the bank, like a bank teller was robbed, and they didn't remember the face of their attacker. They were so traumatized, their memory got completely scrambled. So they obviously saw the person, they had a memory of what happened, but their memory was false. False memories are very, very commonplace. So commonplace, in fact, that nobody can really quite exactly recall anything that happens. They have an approximation. They have an estimation of the memory. So memory, we can say like, okay, everything around, well, I remember this room. I'm in this room. There's physical objects that haven't moved in 50 years, 20 years. Of course, I remember that. Who wouldn't remember? Do you remember? I remember. But at the end of the day, electrical signals in the head, irrationally conceived through our shroud of emotion. Memory is an illusion. Number 2, opinions can be assigned. And not only can they, but they're often assigned. In fact, almost always assigned. Because we think that we come to independent conclusions about things. We think that we have our own individual opinion, but how is that opinion informed? Right? How is it informed? Where did that information come from that helped us build our opinion? Are we turning, if I'm looking at especially when it comes to things like science, where you turn to subject matter experts, seek subject matter experts. Think about science. Are you a scientist? Or do you just turn to an expert and say, well, I believe what this person tells me? That person assigned your opinion. Your parents, your friends, everybody you've talked to, where you get your information from, they're assigning your opinion. In fact, if you're using self-hypnosis, you're telling yourself all these different things, that's also creating your opinion, but it's all informed by the outer world. You don't come to these conclusions independently. You're going off of other people that might have credit, they might have some merit, they might have some credentials, they have some kind of, what's the word? Clout. They have clout. But your news media, like you say, well, I'm a political junkie. You see people on Twitter say, I'm a political junkie. And of course, they turn around and they just, like an NPC, they just say what's said on the media, what their favorite newscaster or analyst or pundit said. They'll just repeat it verbatim. That's not your opinion. That's the opinion of the news. And that's what we all do. We all do that. This isn't targeted at anybody specifically. This is something that happens to everybody. Opinions get assigned. And of course, we all come to our conclusion, but again, it's not ever completely independent. It needs to be from somewhere. It needs to be based on something. And that's what I mean when I say opinions can be assigned. Perfection is a fallacy. That's number 3. Perfection is a fallacy. I've talked about this a bit. I have it in one of my more recent videos. It's got a long title, but it's something to the effect of politics, philosophy, epistemology, postmodernism, absolutism, and my advocacy. Check it out on BitChute and YouTube. I talk about the box. You make a box. To create perfection, you need to have limited parameters to work within, because perfection, of course, is largely subjective. It's largely, people say, well, that's perfect. That was perfect. Well, it's perfect to your taste, my friend. It's perfect to my tastes. But in reality, perfection is a fallacy. There's no such thing as perfect until you reduce the options down and all the number of vectors, the number of variables down to a point where it's manageable. And then within a box, say, for example, a 10 by 10 box, 100 squares, if you can fill every one of those 100 squares with something positive, well, you've achieved within that limited frame something perfect. But in reality, there is no such thing as perfection because it's an opinion. Okay? For one thing, you have to create the box. You have to create an environment in which perfection is possible. And then you have to meet all the criteria of perfection. So perfection is a fallacy. I think trying to achieve perfection is a noble goal, but it's almost like achieving truth. It's like, again, I say the truth is unknowable, it's indeterminable. Perfection, I'm unless you do have that tiny box, unless you really limit it, you can't reach it. You can't reach perfection. In fact, people talk about being perfectly imperfect, the perfect contradiction. In art, actually, I believe the perfect contradiction is a very virtuous thing to strive for. When you've crossed this, you're on the line of creation and destruction, and it's actually hard to describe, but you're on the line of creation and destruction, and you can move any way you'd like, and you're working so precisely within whatever world, whatever artistic world you're in, whatever discipline you're working in. But perfection cannot be reached. It's unreachable because of all the issues that it's subjective. It requires certain things. You can't reach the perfect situation, especially not if you're human, because we are irrational beings, of course. There's more to that, but I think I covered most of the bases. Now on to number 4. Truth is indeterminable, or the truth is unknowable. So I talk about the truth being between both sides. When we're talking about like dualism and talking about, you have in politics, of course, you have the left and the right, or you have any two ends of a spectrum, of a continuum. Of course, neither are necessarily the truth. Things aren't ever completely zero or completely maxed out to 100. But that's, of course, talking about absolutism. The truth, of course, cannot be known within this realm of reality, because even if we're able to map out all of physics, quantum physics, we reduce all of our questions to virtually nothing. We've figured it all out. We've gotten to the singularity, right? But there's always a little more. There's death. What happens to our consciousness after death? It's unknowable. Nobody can become fully dead forever, come back and tell us what they found. They can't scout into the unknown, into the afterworld, the afterlife, and come back. It's unknowable. It can't be known. And once we figure out all these physics puzzles and the nature of reality itself, well, what if it turns out that it's just a simulation? It goes back to the axiom. What if it's just God? What if it's just God's garden? What if it's just a computer chip on some kid in an alternate dimension, some kid's Fisher-Price truck from 2 dimensions over? What if this entire universe is contained as a byproduct or something of his of the computer software, of the hardware? We don't know. We know what we can see. We know what we can observe, but we don't know everything. We can't know everything. So the truth, the absolute truth, is unknowable. We can only do so much. We can only see what we get through empirical evidence, through the scientific method. We can't do it all. So that's what I mean by that. Truth cannot be known. There's always another question. There's always the axiom. There's the why. There's the how. And people often answer that with the axiom of God. They just say, "Oh, Allah did it." At the end of the day, it's all. And I think some people actually do hold this opinion that we are, our existence here on Earth is just sort of like God's imagination or God's mind. There's different ways that people interpret our spiritual nature, spirituality. But yeah. So number 5 is energy survives all outcomes. This also changed. Originally it was energy survives both outcomes, meaning negative and positive. But I decided to go with all in the based 10 tweet. Energy survives all outcomes. So no matter what happens, whether you have a positive result or a negative result, energy is released. May it be positive energy or negative energy. So no matter what happens, there's a continuing energy that pushes along. If you do something wrong and you get negative energy out of it, that energy translates to what happens next. It informs what happens next. If you get positive energy, again, it informs what happens next. So that's what I'm talking about here, where either way, no matter what happens in this galaxy, in this universe, in this reality, energy will survive the outcome. You also have in the world of, astronomy and astrophysics and all this stuff, you have, of course, dark energy. And I don't want to get into that because I'm actually not an expert. Seek subject matter experts and leave me a comment about dark energy and dark matter below. But energy survives all outcomes. So no matter what you do, there will be some kind of residual effect. There will be some consequence. Every action that happens, there's something that comes out of it. Now, it might be negative energy, and that might be a setback to some, but others might thrive on negative energy. I've talked about this a little bit recently. Some might thrive and some might not, but either way, energy survives. And it's up to you how you handle that energy. Number 6, time perception is relative. So, of course, we all know this. Well, the older you get, the more you know it. The fact is, when you get older, time feels like it's passing quicker. It feels like it's passing quicker when you're having fun. They say time flies when you're having fun. Yeah, your perception of time depends on the actions your brain is taking, what's going on, the computations that are happening, how much energy is being expended, and of course, experience. Like how, when you get older, you've already been through the whole routine, so it seems there's all these different ways that time seems to pass differently. If you're using recreational drugs or medicinals or whatever it might be you're using, I don't, of course, recommend using recreational drugs. I'm just using this as a point. Don't take any medical advice from YouTubers. But, of course, your perception of time changes a little bit when you're on, say, for example, marijuana. You might listen to music and it might come out sounding a little bit, you're more relaxed, so it might seem like it's slower. Or depending on which drug you're taking, it might seem like it's faster. It's all relative to your experience, to your perception. All relative to you. Time always moves at the same speed. Now, of course, somebody that's a physicist or someone that has a background can actually maybe correct me on that, because I know that if you've ever seen that movie Interstellar, the Christopher Nolan directed film with Matthew McConaughey, see, I can say that, but not spirituality. They talk about how, like, depending on gravity, time, your perception of time and time itself can change depending on gravity. So there's that as well. But of course, our perception of time is also relative, to add more complication to that. So definitely seek, again, subject matter experts on that. But I did want to throw that in there. Number 7, love is the answer. Because we know hate isn't the answer, right? Like, we want love, positivity. We don't want hate, negativity. When you only look towards the negative, when you only look towards when you look towards hate and negativity, when you look inward, only inward, and you get to this sort of zero-sum game, that isn't very productive to staying positive, to staying healthy mentally. Like, you need other people in your life, right? If you don't have other people in your life, there was a great movie, I believe, I forget which country it's from. It's from an Eastern European country. It's in another language. It might be Bulgaria, but it's called The Wall. Check it out, The Wall. It's like 2012. Not Pink Floyd's The Wall, also a good movie. But this woman, I won't spoil the movie, but this woman is isolated in a cabin, and she has nobody to talk to. So she writes. She writes. And she ends up sort of talking to herself by writing it down. And she actually has, she doesn't know if anybody will ever read what she has to say, but she's writing it. And what happens over the course of the film, she's in isolation in the mountains, is that her pets become almost like human beings to her. Like, of course we do love our pets. I have 2 cats and I love them. But I don't look at them as human. I see them as, they're animals, and I take care of them, and they're cute. But she actually put a real personality on the animals, and felt extreme pain and sorrow when they, I don't want to spoil the film, but bad things happen in the film. And, love is the answer, because it's what we strive for, and it doesn't have to be romantic love. It doesn't have to be spiritual love. Love is representative of everything that we hold dear, things that give us positive energy. Okay, hate is negative, usually negative energy, and it can be directed in positive ways. It can be used, and negative energy isn't necessarily, evil or wrong. It can be directed for positive use. But love is the answer. We would never say hate is the answer. Love is the answer. 11-11, whatever you want to say. And of course, after love, once you realize that love is the answer, number 8, balance is the goal. This is one of the most important of the based 10 statements, because no matter what happens, you don't want to have too much. The question is always enough. Do I have enough love? Is there enough hate to balance it out? Because people are always looking. We might try to say that we're good people. We're good people. I'm not doing a moral judgment here, but we'll say all these things. At the end of the day, though, we are just finding an outlet for our aggression, for our irrational human hatred. We're always looking for an outlet. May it be shooting things up in a video game. That's a violent example. It might be going to the gym. It might be working out those muscles. Get the aggression out. Get all that negative energy that you're pounded into the boxing, your boxing mats and things like that. What do they call it? A little short on words today. But no, people have all these different ways of managing their love and their hate. If someone loves another person, and all they do is pour their adoration, all they do is every day, I love you, I love you, I love you, it's too much. It's more than enough. It's like the feeling is good, the sentiment, the intentions are always good with these things. Just like with reparations. It's like it might be a little bit racist, but it's altruistic. It's egalitarian. It's trying to help. It's good-hearted. It's good-intentioned. But balance is the goal. You can't just pour your love into something endlessly. There has to be a counterbalance. Otherwise, you can't even define the other thing. You can't define the good thing if you don't have the bad thing. You need to have both to have the complete picture. There is no light without dark. So there has to be a balance. There has to be something that works for you and works for everybody. Works for everybody and everything involved. And it needs to be, it's about balance. It's about achieving a little bit of this, a little bit of that, getting everything lined up, and then right in the middle, you're balancing the whole thing, and it's going well, and you're maintaining. And you're getting from point A, birth, to point B, death, just fine. Love, hate, everything in between. We redirect hate. We redirect hate. It's part of the modern religion of social justice, by the way. Redirecting hate. You just say, well, things are happening. There's been injustices here. People are not getting what they need. Why don't we create a villain? We'll call them the oppressor. And, well, how do we judge that? Immutable characteristics. Things that people can't change. we will say that they are easy, they're okay to hate. They're okay to, oppression essentially is hatred, right? So if they're projecting hatred, well, it's totally cool. It's totally validated. I'm totally validated to direct my hatred towards them, right? So I say that, intersectionality just redirects hate, and it points it to people in an irrational way. Of course, that's why I call it a modern religion. You got faith and you got reason, and sometimes faith overtakes reason. But that's another topic. Balance is the goal. You want balance. As much as you want love, can't have too much, right? You gotta have a balanced amount. It makes you happy. Contradictions trick the mind. Yes, they do. I talk about limiting information and stacking contradictions in order to, basically be a sophist, to control people, to get them to do what you want, to socially engineer them, to push them in different directions. You give them only so much information, and then you stack contradictions. You stack things that don't make sense, that sound right, but on the surface, and there's also this idea that people can look at something that isn't a contradiction and say, oh, well, if you disagree that this is a contradiction, it's cognitive dissonance on your part. And they're like, we all have our own way of looking at it. But contradictions trick the mind. It's important to note that you say something contradictory, and depending on who's saying it, some people might just take it on their word. But then you stack another contradiction on top of that, and then you stack another one. Actually, Matt Walsh had a really good one about the transgender community, and just the way that, I support, of course, the transgender community, but just the way that they've handled their public relations, and he actually has a great tweet on that. I don't remember it offhand, and I know I've probably stoked some interest by going there. But contradictions trick the mind. It's how we get easily confused. It's how, especially one contradiction is one thing. It can be sort of like, well, this doesn't work. This doesn't make logical sense. But then you keep on stacking more and more on the same topic, and eventually it's sort of like your brain, my brain, just shuts down and says, I can't do this. I can't do this. And then I finally say, complete. Number 10, complete. Is it complete? You let me know in the comments below. These are just, they're just statements. They're just statements that hold, in my mind, truth. I think that they're true statements for the most part. But, of course, as with all things, perfection, they are not perfect. Number 3, perfection is a fallacy. So they could be changed. They could get better. But I felt it was a good idea to air these on Twitter, and of course air them in person here on the video as well. Just to get you thinking. Just to get you thinking and to talk it through myself so that I can get better at what I'm doing.